publisher, Hilary, Regan, the editors, Mike Deeb, Philipe Denis, and Mark James, as well as the Dominican order. We are all welcome. Thank you for coming to celebrate this milestone, a published book of 500 pages, including 70 contributors that created and printed within 8 months from conception to publication this tribute to Albert Nolan. Our proceedings will be blessed by Bishop Malusi Kulwana.
We light this candle as a statement of faith. The light of Christ conquers the darkness. We light this candle in recognition of Albert Nolan's faithfulness to the charge of Christ, that we be light and salt. We light this candle as a point of focus for all of us gathered here to convene our minds on the light of Christ that Albert pointed us to in his lifetime. Holy Trinity, fountain of relational love, after whom we are created, and the well of the grace through which we are able to live up to the privilege of your image. We gather this afternoon to recognize and honor your servant, Albert Nolan, whose love and dedication to you has inspired many of us to embrace the cost of love in a wicked society. Mercifully grant, we pray, that our honoring Albert Nolan may rekindle in our lives the spirituality and drive to commit our days to working for Albert's vision of a society of justice and peace as foundation on your image of love. We ask this in the name of him who said, "Behold, I am with you to the end of the age," even Jesus Christ who called Albert Nolan to our common discipleship. Amen.
Good evening, everyone. You can blame Father Mike for me being your program director today. When he invited me to do this, I thought, I think what Tumi Morake is, they're going to be very curious with this choice of facilitator. But I was having a nice laugh with Father Mike now, saying, actually being here, being invited to be here, as Tumi Morake, the comedian who's been known to push the envelope, reminds me that Jesus did dine with a tax collector, so we're all welcome, really. There's no judgment. So the first person we are going to invite onto the stage now, they said there's a Dominican leader, provincial even. I said, no, not at this age. He's my age. And yet there he is. Father Mike Morake. And he's going to speak about the book and the Dominican legacy in Southern Africa. If you could please welcome him with a warm round of applause.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all of you. Yes, and welcome to this book launch. I'm Father Mike, as has been introduced. I'm the provincial of the Dominicans in Southern Africa. And I was also privileged to have lived a greater part with Father Albert Nolan as my mentor, as well as my formator, as they say in religious terms. So as I was looking at the topic that I'm supposed to talk about, Dominican legacy should be rather Dominican tradition, because the Dominicans are not, at least they're not all of them dead. I mean, the tradition still goes on. And I'm sure Albert would have liked it to be like that. So we are looking at the contribution of the book towards the Dominican tradition. And what is this tradition that we're talking about? It's a tradition that is steeped in a life of study. And the book is actually the evidence. It gives the sinews and the flesh to that ideal of living a life of study, assiduous study, and as Dominicans would realize, the search for truth. But that can be just an ideal that is far-fetched somewhere in the clouds. But in this book and in the life of Albert, we do come in contact with that pursuit for the truth, the search for the truth that is not only for any academic accolades as such, but outside of the lecture room, some of them, they struggle But in Albert, we see somebody who is dedicated, who is able to connect what he studies with the reality of the world, contextual theology at its best. So this is the greatest contribution that we see. And this comes from the Dominican foundation itself, from the time that St. Dominic started the Dominican order. His vision was to have young people go to universities, to go and probe and ask the contemporary questions of his times. And coming from Albert's own namesake, Albert the Great, we see this coming down over the years. And in this part of the world, it had not really somehow taken shape. But with the presence and the work of Albert Nolan, we see this coming into fruition. His life, as I lived with him and I remember, was a life of discipline. If he was writing, he was writing. He didn't want anybody to disturb him. If he was going for his walks, he took his walks. If he was in prayer, he was there in prayer. So you see a life that is always centered on study and discipline. And this will be the greatest contribution to the Dominican tradition, and also a challenge to the Dominicans and those who follow the Dominican spirituality. That yes, we pray, but we also study. But not only study, we ask the pertinent questions of our times. A life of study and a life of search for the truth, no matter what comes out of it. Sometimes the search for truth is a very scary one, and many people do not want to go all the way. But if it means that one has to go all the way and be a prophet, so be it. And every prophet, as you know, is always reluctant, always uneasy, because they know they are not worthy. But nevertheless, it is a passion and a life that is centered on study. Thank you so much.
Now, what I find special, because I was finding out how this event came together, who to expect here, and man, WhatsApp groups have come a long way. Because I was told there's a WhatsApp group that had come together in honoring Father Nolan's life, and then that WhatsApp group didn't dismantle after everything was done, and that same WhatsApp group said, now we're going to get together and put together this book launch where we're going to honor one of our own. So the young people out there, I'm going to teach them that, listen, WhatsApp group can go far. After this, there is apparently an after party. I didn't know you rolled that crazy, but I'm down. I didn't know there was a little bit of, yes, good times. So there's an after party. It's not quite catered for, but I've seen, everybody in here is Christian. I've seen what you guys can do with 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. So I'm sure there'll be enough to go around. I mean, there was a wedding with no wine. Somebody arrived and said, hey, drinks on me, I'm blessing. I'm sure there'll be no shortage. Our next speaker is Frank Chikane, who is an inspirational leader, manager, teacher, motivator, enabler, facilitator, counselor, and community builder with a vast experience as a pastor in politics and public speaking, problem analysis and resolution, research, strategic planning, and business development, conflict resolution and management, still manages to wake up, brush his teeth, and have a good time while doing all of that. And the title of this keynote speech is Reading the Book, What Triggered Me, What I Learned That I Didn't Know Before. Please welcome Frank Chikane.
Let me just start by disclosing that when I was asked to come and speak, they did not give me a theme. And so I had my imagination about what I was going to say here. And then until the note came and said, this is what you're going to speak about. And then if you're going to do that, it means you must have read the book. And I tried my best. You can see it's almost half the size of a brick. But I've scanned through the book. So thank you very much for inviting me to speak on this reluctant prophet's book, which was done after he left us. I've been following that WhatsApp group including its debate about let's shut down. You know, you remember that debate. Let's shut down. Others say, no, we can't shut down. And others say, what are you going to use it for? I think it has given birth to a book. That's really what it is. So we must thank the organizers. We appreciate the hard work you've put into this launch. We are here because of you. We must also thank the publisher, Michael Hilary Regan of the ATF Press. Thank you for your commitment. I've never seen a publisher who does a book in 8 months. And I would like to really thank you. And the editors, you know, Mike Deeb, Philipe Denis, and Mark James, for the record time within which they were able to put this book together. It's not easy. The one thing I learned is that they asked too many people to write because they thought many failed. You can almost count that, you know, 50% will not come to the party. And in this case, they surprised them. I mean, 70 contributors, I've never seen that for a long time. And I think we should give them a big hand for having achieved that. I would like to thank you for this great work. Now, I had to warn the Dominican provincial that I'm going to gossip about him. After the passing away of Father Nolan, we linked up by telephone because it was critical at that moment. I had seen Father Nolan a few months earlier. Indeed, he was frail, and he was still quite clear in his brain. And we debated about South Africa. And as you know, my pain about South Africa is that it is not what we fought for. And for those who paid the price, it is very painful to see it. And so my last meeting with him was about that matter. I had to say to him, like I said to Archbishop Desmond Tutu, I also visited him, and we sat there, and he was really stressed about what's happening in South Africa. I said, please don't stress about it. Those who are still able to do something will take care of it, because you can't do anything about it. And I said the same to my brother, Albert Nolan. Please don't stress about, because you can't do anything about it. You know, you reach a stage where you can't do anything about it. But those who are able to do something, who are not doing it, must be declared guilty of failure. And so for those of us who can still do something, we must be accused for failure. And I've talked about Sister Bennett in this context as well. So in our conversation, it was, what are we going to do about the passing away of Albert Nolan? What are we going to do to honor him? What about memorial services? And as he was talking out to me about it, I remember after you talked to me, sir, I thought, what am I going to do about all these things I'm doing that are taking me away from doing normal things? You know, what am I going to do? And I am pleased that there are friends here, there are brothers and sisters, there are comrades who took the matter up together with the provincial and other people to make sure that we give our brother a good send-off, which he deserved. And I think we can thank all those people who did this hard work, which led to this book. And then, of course, there was a story about what are we going to do with all these lovely tributes. You know, some of the tributes were extraordinary. I mean, it was like, you can't just lose it in a WhatsApp. This WhatsApp, you know, cancels itself and disappears with the messages. What are we going to do about it? And as you know, the Dominican provincial knows that I gave up because I knew I could not do it. You know, when you can't do something, don't try it. Don't promise and fail. When I can't, I say so. And I'm pleased that there are disciples of Albert Nolan here who did a fantastic job. The book, it's many pages thick, and I'm not going to talk about those many pages. What is important about it is that the contributors are so diverse. I couldn't believe it. Both international and national. They represent exactly what Albert Nolan was about. You know, this diversity for me, it's extraordinary. It's the themes that are covered in the book, the various disciplines that are dealt with are extraordinary. This, according to Timothy Ratcliffe, I just want to quote you in your 4 words. He says that this diversity is a reflection of the extent to which Albert Nolan impacted on our lives and our communities and the people we worked with. Mike Deeb continues on the same theme by saying that the diversity provides a rich kaleidoscope of Albert, the brother. He calls him the Dominican preacher, the priest, the chaplain, the pastor, the mentor, the theologian, the intellectual, the political activist, and a friend. Albert Nolan was a humble servant of God. I think all of us agree. If you went into this room, you'll miss it. Yeah, you'll not even notice his presence. I didn't even know he had a PhD for a long time. Those who worked with us in the institute, it took some time to actually say, hey, you've got a PhD, man. Yes. You know, he didn't even impose himself on you. He was a servant of God, but his impact was extraordinary. He entered every situation and context with a desire to listen before he talks. And I can see the colleagues who were with us in the Institute for Contextual Theology here. He entered every situation and he listens, he takes stock before he speaks. And then he accompanies you before he even announces his background, and he accompanies you. So he learns about you as you learn from him. And he builds a true form of solidarity. You know, the type of solidarity which makes you to be ready to die for your brother. I mean, he enriched us, those who worked with him. In our imperfections, we also enriched him. You know, I remember him going with us to Soweto, into, Ipelecheng and other places. And this white man who walks around with his black guys and they go to hide in a place. He was actually, he couldn't hide his whiteness, unfortunately. So people noticed that he was there. But I just want to say about this book in particular, and when I scanned through it, it taught me a lesson that you can never so say you know a person. Yeah, you can never say that. You know a person. You know, during the struggle, we used to work within a context of needs to know basis. You didn't ask too many questions. If you are told you must be at that corner at this time, during those old days, if you missed it, you were dead.
There was no GPS.
No, there was no GPS. You had to find the place. But if you missed it, you were dead. Or if you missed it, somebody was going to die. You know, I have a brother, the last born in my family, who they missed each other with his comrade, and then he arrived in a place and an explosion happened and he died. You know what I'm talking, just missing it. You could miss death, or it can lead to somebody's death. That's how serious it was during that time. So it was needs to know. So we didn't ask too many questions. You asked less questions to be able to do that. But now with this book, there's the need to know more about Albert Nolan that we did not know. And I must tell you, I mean, when I went through it, this Albert Nolan I know, I never asked that he was born in the Western Cape. I mean, and then he ends up in Stellenbosch. I never asked all those questions. They were not relevant. But when you read this book, you know what formed him and where he comes from. And then the student chaplains, I met his students and disciples as we worked together. But I didn't know as much as it's in those articles. It's just, I wished I knew all of it before. And then, of course, Mayfair, I had an idea. I went there. I also wanted to see how they live there. Because he said to me when he came to the institute, how much are we going to pay you for salary? Let's negotiate. He said, Icon, just give me enough for me to contribute to the house where I stay. You know, I don't need your salary. So I thought it was funny. So we all earned more than him, many times more than him, but he was qualified many times more than us. You know, it was such a contradiction. So I went to the house, I got to know him there, but when you scan through this book, you know you don't know much. Now, this chapter 4, section 4, that's the one I thought I would know a lot, because that's where I lived with Albert Nolan. And then I discovered I didn't know too much. Even in the area where I thought I knew about him, no. These comrades who are in that list know things I did not know, because it was based on a needs to know. So in a sense, I didn't know too many of these things. I'm going to learn a lot, but you know, it's only to understand so that I can learn from him and know what he is about. And then, of course, the area of the opening space for debates also got me to know a lot. I know a bit about Challenge and what he was doing, but not much, actually. I have a huge task to read extensively about each one of those chapters, because there is something to learn about it. All of us must thank those who worked on this book, because we shall now know better who Albert Nolan was. He lived amongst us. We thought we knew him. We lied a lot about knowledge. But now we have an opportunity to read this book and know him more and learn a lot about him. I thought that I knew his underground work, because we did lots of underground work with him. When I went to the funeral, I thought there must be lots of the friends here, including his Catholic friends and Dominicans, who wouldn't have known that, hey, this father used to do underground work, you know. So I thought I will share that with you. But actually, I've now discovered there's more I didn't know, even when I was underground with him. He took care of me. He set up the logistics. He nearly made me a Catholic, by the way. I mean, almost. Because, I mean, I was in Catholic convents and Jesuits and the brothers. You know, the Catholic Church has got lots of hiding places than any other church. I mean, in my church, I would have been picked up very quickly. They really took care of me. And I thought I knew him. I knew he was involved in funding. I knew He was helping victims. I knew that he smuggled my manuscript, No Life of My Own, to be published in London, Institute for International Relations. I thought I knew all of that until I read Horst Kleinsmith. You know, go and read Horst Kleinsmith. When you read that, you will know that he was not only doing underground work, he even had a number, 42. The code for Albert Nolan, it's number 42. And coded like that, he sent messages out of the country and into the country, and he never got caught. No one ever decoded that code. Chapter 43, he says operative 42. You know, please read operative 42, then you'll know who Albert Nolan was. I mean, he did risky things for the sake of our liberation struggle. We are where we are because of people like Albert Nolan. I want to conclude by saying that those of us who are here, who are still able, have got a responsibility. We must stop the pain of our people. 42 municipalities that are dysfunctional, can't even manage money. It gets stolen before they know it's there. People who are deployed there. Sewer running in streets, in the Val. It's unbelievable. By the way, this thing is treasonable. If I had my way, I would charge these guys for treason. You see, we have load shedding here, and I've said so. And the technician said to me, and I'm sitting down, man, if you hold politicians and criminals constant, if you are doing mathematics, just make these politicians A and B, which is constant, control it. We will get you power in 6 months. We'll do it. These criminals, they sit in Sentin here. They stay in very expensive houses here. And they are keeping us in the dark, not because we can't have power, but they make sure you don't have power, so they make billions. And we started a campaign the beginning of this year, and some of us made lots of noise. Even the Reiter's book helped. I haven't read it, but I mean, said about the Reiters. If he asked for advice for me, I would say leave the communists and the comrades in your interview. Then the story would have been handled better. You know what I'm talking about? I think he messed it up by mixing it with comrades, and now if I call you comrade, it means I'm out of his books. But I think the pressure, watch my words, if we displace the criminals in Witbank and they have no access to the power stations, we'll have our power. We'll have our power. Because it's deliberately caused to be what it is. And it's treasonable. I think people should be charged for treason. Those of us who are quiet and do nothing and are afraid are party to this pain of our people. We can't let people to be rich at the expense of the people. We fought for this freedom, and we must make sure that we sustain it and that the generations to come will be able to live better.
Thank you, comrade. You know, you're right about this book, though. You need to take your time with it. If you haven't read it, don't pretend you have. Because for me, I'm still in the middle. I'm still at the beginning. And I must say, when somebody is inspiring from so many angles, and for me, I call myself a spiritually curious person, where I can get something that connects me to something bigger than myself, I plug in. And it is so amazing to see someone who understands, because I used to have a problem with Christianity when I was much younger. And my problem was separating it from love. When you meet people who are so in love with God and the Bible, and they can quote it from back to front, yet the way they relate to people makes no biblical sense. And then you remove the church from love, from truth, from your everyday life. Then what is it there for? And so for me, as a young person learning about this incredible man, I have to tell you this. In reading about how incredible he is, I'm reading about how incredible everyone is. I am seeing the power of Ubuntu. I'm seeing the power of Mabohonku Atebana. It is a saying in Setswana, which roughly translated means more hands together make it work. And so for me, that's just my 2 cents on your right. This book, you must sit with it. Don't think you know. Read again. And now we're going to hear from the CEO of ATF Press, the publisher who took on that mammoth task of publishing this book. They have, over the past 30 years, they're based in Australia, and over the past 30 years have published different books, a wide array of books, which have been published in print and e-published as well. Please welcome Hilary Regan.
Thank you for that welcome, and thank you all for coming to this celebration. Book launches are always important as celebration and closure of a job well done. So today is a celebration and closure of a project over many months in the making. I have 3 things to say, and they're all interrelated. The background to this book. Second, the importance of publishing. And third, some thank yous. So to the background of the book. ATF Press, as we've just heard, has been working for close on 30 years as an independent Australian publisher. We publish books in print and in EPUB and do books in a variety of languages other than English. And most years we have some books being translated into English and books into other languages. We started off solely as a religious publisher 30 years ago, but about 15 years ago we diversified so that we now do different types of books, which we have in different imprints or names, divisions, like ATF Children's, ATF Space, ATF Theology, and now ATF Africa. We do about 10 to 15 books a year and academic journals as well. And so we've published around 200 to 300 books in our time. We distribute all of our publications locally in Australia and internationally through a variety of distributors and ways that we sell our books off our website as well. I'm a theologian by training and was one of the founders of the publishing house. We are governed by a board of directors and outsource many of the different aspects of the publishing work. As CEO, I'm a bit like the conductor of the orchestra, the one who coordinates the work and brings all the different individuals and groups together so that it is all done. Most months we have 2 or 3 new proposals, either that come to us or that we go to authors, editors or translators. At any one time, we have about 9 to 10 different books at different stages. Right now, as we launch this book, we have 3 new proposals to be examined. We have 5 books in various stages of preparation. We have 2 translations either completed or near complete. And we have 3 other books to be launched in the next few months, in preparation for 2 big international book events before mid-November, as well as 4 launches of this book in Australia, including one with the South African High Commission in Canberra, one in the UK, and one in the US. Normally, it's a good 12 to 18 months from receiving a proposal or making a proposal to reaching the finished product ready for release, promotion, distribution, and sale. Our distributors like 6 months advance notice for any new project. On this publication, they got that, but just. This book was unusual as it was first suggested by me early after Albert's death in October last year. It has 3 editors and we landed with 70 contributors, as we know. A very big project for any publisher. Today, on this day of celebration, we've reached this mark in just, I thought it was 8 months, but Mike told me the other day it's 6. Quite a reason for celebration for the 12 different people involved in some way in this project. I, along with the 3 editors who are in this room, as well as our partner for sales and distribution in Southern Africa, which means there are 7 others outside of this room involved. They're in Australia, they're in Asia, they're in the UK and the US. Shortly after Albert died, I suggested to Mike Deeb, who I've worked with on another project some years ago, and with whom we have a number of mutual friends through the YCS movement, that we should do a book in honour of Albert. Doing such a book would be a big job, but an important way of honouring the many aspects of Albert's life and work. He, needless to say, was reluctant, especially when I spoke of my timeline to do this. I argued that a book like this needs to come out sooner rather than later, as part of the process of the grieving and honouring a life so well lived. So we came up with a book which took some thinking of who should be invited to write and where the themes and areas of Albert's life should be covered. My thanks to Mike and his editors for that work. I certainly did not have many of the contacts of those who should contribute. For me, the initial list was staggering in the number and range. And without Mike's work, of the knowledge and the contacts he had to whom to invite with the breadth and depth of this book, it would not have been possible. As I'm sure Mike will explain, the editors wanted the book to look at many aspects of Albert's life, from his family life, early life, his life at study, life as a Dominican, life with his brothers and his sisters in the order, his involvement with those in formation, etc., etc. It's quite a list. Many aspects of a life so well lived to be covered by so many different people and not all living in this country or indeed in Africa. I made a few suggestions here and there and took responsibility for the publishing decisions, working on timelines, deadlines. A process began, which Mike will detail in greater depth, of inviting and engaging with the possible contributors. As I'm sure he will explain, none of us realised so many people would accept that invitation. The process involved a constant, often daily, round of communication with the editors, responding to questions, clarifications, suggestions, seeking possibilities by WhatsApp, email and phone calls between the editors and myself from January onwards, and there in more recent months between myself and our partner at ATF Press. These communications often, at least on my end, did not keep to regular business hours because of the time difference between here and Australia. In all of this, some things did not happen, others did. Some possible contributors declined, others and other ideas came on board late in the day. So what we have today is a result of much hard work, with some pretty well full-time work of long hours over those last 6 months by Mike, Mark and Philipe. Every publishing project has its own momentum. Each always has its own challenges, problems to solve, etc. There's never a dull moment in publishing. It's always a constantly moving, exciting and very creative and fulfilling work. Publishing in many ways is a form of preaching and teaching, and so it's very much a Dominican type of work. I've been involved in publishing for close on 40 years, and so of course will always sing its praises. In publishing, we are, in my view, handing on the fruits of the thinking, the exploration of ideas that have come through, that are contemplated and developed on and written. A certain topic then, a concept of a life or a person, an idea. It is very much, in my view, linked to the other lesser well-known motto of the order. Well-known is that of veritas, the other less well-known one of to contemplate and hand on the fruits of one's contemplation. Good preaching, good publishing, both involved contemplation, thinking, listening, then finding ways of communicating. Timothy Radcliffe refers in his foreword to this book that Mark James has said in his paper that Albert did not want to write an autobiography or have a biography written, but that people should read his books. As you will read in Timothy's foreword, he adds to that to say, Albert, you will meet through his friends and hear what they say about him. In this book, we are doing exactly that. In this book, many people can learn about the various aspects of Albert's life. So, to thank you. I never met Albert. I grew up a member of the YCS and the University Catholic Student Movement in Australia, where we read Jesus Before Christianity. I corresponded with Albert in the early 1980s on a number of matters to do with his books. In recent times, I spoke with him on the phone when he was in Marion House, as I was wanting to get a better understanding of the link between his writings and his involvement with the YCS and other student movements. The project is now being achieved by what is being published in this book and other publications that will come out. Albert had already contributed to one of our books published in 2007 on Dominican education. So, my thanks and appreciation on the behalf of the board of ATF Press go to many people. First, of course, to Albert for his life, for his work and writing, to Albert's family, Many thanks to the Dominican Order, and in particular the Dominican Vice Province in Southern Africa, of which he was a beloved brother, both here and internationally. My great thanks to Mike Deeb, to Philipe Denis, and to Mark James for their continuous and enormous amount of work in their job as editors, in working on the concept of the book, contacting and liaising with the contributors. They are here with us today, and I would like to acknowledge that role. Mike, for first accepting this challenge and then bringing the other two on board. To all the contributors here in this room, or watching on video when we have this launch, I thank you for your insights in relating your knowledge and experience. To all those on the ATF end who contributed. To Vickers Van Zyl of ATF Press for becoming a partner with us in this project for the sale and distribution of the book in Southern Africa after the launch. Vickers is here today, and I'd like to acknowledge his presence and thank him for showing an interest dating back some months when he first responded very positively 10 minutes after my first email to him, unheard of in publishing, and he's been like that since. So a vote of thanks on behalf of ATF formally, I would like to hand over the copy of the book to a number of people. Mike Deeb. We also have a little ATF beanie. Thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoy this afternoon, and I will hand back.
And now I'm going to invite, without further ado, one of the editors of this book, a man who I forced to marry my husband and I. It was a great journey. A man who is Belgium born, has been to Geneva, Rome, now lives in Cape Town. He's a world citizen. Please, let's welcome Father Mike Deeb.
Before I start, I think I'd like my two co-editors to come and join me up here. Wonderful to see such a huge crowd here. Thank you so much for coming. And the three of us are very happy and proud that we can share this launch with so many of you. This book, as you see, is called Reluctant Prophet. At the bottom you see it says edited by. It actually should have read reluctantly edited by. Because after Albert died in October last year, there was an outpouring of emotion in so many places. There were so many memorials, there were social media groups, there were press obituaries. Even the government cabinet meeting issued a statement after his death. And Hilary immediately contacted me and saying, can we organize these books and can you edit it? And I said, no. I was very busy. I was busy with my own, a huge project of my own. I didn't have time. So I said, but try some other Dominicans and other people who maybe can do it. And I even pointed to people like Mark and Philippe and a few others. And I said, they may be better qualified to do this. Hilary came back to me and said he approached all of them and they all said no. He came back and said, can you maybe just help me to get a whole lot of addresses and then I'll write them and organize it myself, he said of himself. That was a difficult one for me to say no to. So I said, okay. But it took me more than a month to respond to his thing. And eventually he wrote to me in mid-December and he said, are you going to send me these addresses? In fact, I didn't even respond because I was very busy. And I thought, when I'm ready, I will respond. Then at the beginning of January, he wrote to me and said, okay, we'll call it off. Then when I got that message, I thought, this will be such a pity, you know. It'll be an opportunity lost. Everyone's been talking about perpetuating Albert's legacy, and if we lose this, what to do? So I said, okay, I will give you these addresses. So I drew up a first list, and then I immediately asked Mark and Philippe if they would help me, and a few other brothers as well, to clarify people who are potential contributors and all that sort of thing. It took so much time and energy just to do that. Eventually I thought, what the hell? I may as well just edit this book. So I agreed with him then that I would do the editing. But as the weeks and the months went on, it became clear to me that this was becoming a more and more massive task. Then I had to appeal to Mark and Philippe if they couldn't assist me with things. And they, this time, even though they said no to Hilary, they graciously said yes to me. I was so grateful for that, because ever since then, we have been working very closely as a team. We started by identifying all the themes in the book. We identified all the potential contributors. We met for a few days to structure the book. We worked on what the titles of all the articles should be. After all the articles came in, we proceeded to edit every article, each one of these 70 articles that you've heard about. And that's taken a lot of time for all of us. For me, it's been a full-time job for the last 5 months, and then eventually 6 months, just for organizing these launches. But it's been a wonderful experience of working together, and of working not only the three of us together, but working with so many others. I must make special mention here of Terence Creamer, who's also with us today, who really helped enormously. Can you just stand up, Terence? There he is there. Thank you. Terence helped us a lot in organizing a lot of the articles, and so I'm very grateful for his contribution as well. As has been said, we cast the net very wide. We asked about 90 or 100 people. We didn't expect everyone to accept. In fact, very few declined. Only about 8 or 10 people declined. We were left with a bit of a problem, because I was thinking we were going to have a book of about 300 pages. But anyway, with everyone having accepted, we graciously welcomed all that people sent us. Unfortunately, there were many people who felt left out, and they were disappointed that they weren't asked to write articles. I knew when we were doing this that there would be such cases, but at some time point we just had to stop. My deep apologies to all those who could have added so much value to this book, but unfortunately, I'm sure a 1,000-page book wouldn't have gone down so well. So, as has been said, there are so many different genres in this book, and I think that's what's an interesting thing about it. And people from so many different backgrounds and religious and non-religious experiences adds great value to anyone wanting a diversity. And I must thank all of the contributors. Each of you have been wonderful in this process. And I want to thank you especially for your patience. For many of you, I badgered you. I know that some of you had to rewrite things. Some of you had to come back 4, 5, sometimes 10 times to rework some of the things. And thank you for your patience and not dropping out in that process. This book is now coming out less than 9 months after Albert's death. So he died in October last year. In less than 9 months, this book has been born prematurely. But it's a book, hopefully, that is going to continue to perpetuate his legacy and hopefully inspire all of us. I think all of us here knew him in one way or another, even if it was at a distance. I think hopefully we'll all be inspired by this book to be what this title says. So you can read more in the introduction about where the title Reluctant Prophet came from. But I will just conclude by saying that hopefully reading this book will help all of us to perpetuate Albert's legacy, firstly as a prophet. We are all called to be prophets in one way or another. Okay, maybe there are many different gifts, but in some way or another, we're all called to be prophets. To be speaking the truth, regardless of the consequences. To be condemning unjust political and economic structures. To be always reading the signs of the times. But we are also called to be, as Frank was saying, a humble person, like Albert. Part of his reluctance was his humility. Whenever we think of a prophet, often we think about someone who's quite serious and quite grumpy at times, maybe, or someone who's quite aggressive and abrasive. But Albert, he was always so joyful. He was someone who was always listening to others, always totally, everyone felt welcome with, even if he disagreed with you, you felt welcomed by him. We hope and pray that all of us can become such reluctant prophets, not there just for ourselves, but for God's project, so that we can all become more joyful, that all become able to make others, and even those who disagree with us, to feel at home with us. So thank you, and God bless.
Father Mark has asked that we do give some time for some questions. I hope you're not listening for your glass of wine and those divine pies.
It's more of a comment. We know what it means to be committed to liberation and emancipation of people. But I've got a concern. Where are the feminist voices? I do not doubt that this has been a great project. But where are the young people? Where are the black faces? Where are the women? We need to see women participating. From a feminist perspective, from a womanist perspective, it doesn't look good to talk about a man and it's men who are involved and it's men who are busy. Where are the women? The role of women is not to organize food there at the back. We also need to see women's faces and women in front and women editing and women being involved. Thank you very much.
Thank you. But much like Father Nolan, us women are not chasing accolades and shine. We're doing it. We know we're running things. Am I correct, ladies? We know we've got this. That's why it happened. We were the ones holding up their back, supporting them. We are the neck that tells the head where to look.
Mike spoke about the sort of the evolution of the book from the WhatsApp group and everything else. But consistently within that particular group when it started, there had been a call for action in terms of probably the current situation that is there and sort of situation that we're finding ourselves, that the prophecies that we've been speaking for, what is the Christian duty within the current situation that we're finding ourselves. So probably the question or the comment then would relate to where to from here. Given that the book probably fully encapsulates the life of Father Albert as a prophet, but also as an activist. And probably as Reverend Frank had said that we fully never understood who Albert was. Now that we're getting much more of a deeper, in-depth look as to what the life of Albert meant, what is it then that probably we're going to carry through to sort of make sure that the legacy doesn't, it's a living memory. It's a tradition that continues, as probably the other Mike had said, that this should not be a tombstone, if one has to put it that way, but rather a book of action. Maybe some kind of a new Kairos, if at all we wanted to talk to it in and about it. And probably it's to ask all of us, how do we bring this into life, into action, beyond just memorialization and everything like that. But yeah, that is the thing. But thanks, Mike and Mark and Philippe for it's an assiduous work that you've done. I wouldn't have done it. But thank you very much.
Many people have raised that same question, as Tiamo says, in the book and even outside of, in the group, the WhatsApp group, and in outside of it. I think that it's an important thing, and people have been talking about it ever since Albert's death. I've had I don't know how many conversations with how many people about this precise question. And I think that this book hopefully has perpetuated to some extent this conversation, and in reading it and in distributing it and engaging more and more people in it, hopefully it will continue to spark that. But I think for something to go forward, it needs some initiative. So it's a question of who will initiate what. There are already many things going on. Many of the people in this room have already initiated many things. So it's not as though nothing is happening. If we wanted to particularly focus on something like Albert, so I think that in time, hopefully, something will be clearer as we continue the conversation. The real need about how Albert's legacy can impact or affect us, hopefully that will emerge. And I'm confident maybe in the next months this will take place. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Mike. We look forward to the announcement of the foundation being launched.
We worked with Father Mike in the 80s as students, the Student Union for Christian Action, Concerned Evangelicals, and that group of people that are closer to Reverend Chikane. And we got introduced to the Institute for Contextual Theology, learned about the importance of balancing ideology and theology. And then my question is specifically to Reverend Chikane. Where can we get this intellectual leadership to guide the next phase of our struggle to balance this issue of theology and ideology? Because there are two things that, in my view, are very deficient in our discourse going forward. And as a result, the issues of ethics, corruptions, and so on are actually going uncontrolled. I just wanted to get the Reverend's comment on that. Thank you.
I hate answering a question like this, actually, because I don't think it's some of us who should say what should happen. I nearly almost, as they were asking the question, Bishop Mokhoto, I nearly said they must ask you to answer that question because you had organized people to talk about Kairos and what needs to be done and all that. There are a number of people here who have done that. But you know, I feel that something is missing, maybe of what Albert Nolan did. You know, the disciples, he was older than us. He is 7 years younger than my mother. So he could have been my father. But he worked with us in a way that produced young disciples. You know, the young students, Catholic students, etc., YCS, and etc. Most of the people who are sitting here would have come from that experience, but he didn't prescribe to us. People forget that when we got involved, we were young actually. Yeah, we were very young. That's why I look like I'm not getting old, because I worked with old people and I'm still here and they are gone. You know what I'm talking about? So, but we were young. I mean, yeah, my first detention, I was 27. Petra Mohapi died at 27, Biko at 31 in detention. It was a young generation. I don't want to talk about this bishop. By the way, I found a younger person who was bent. I used to say he was the youngest. He was 21 when he was put under a banning order, Mama Lucy Bumlwan. Now, I'd forgotten in Kagiso, in that St. Francis Church, that there was an 18-year-old who was
illegal.
banned.
It must be illegal.
Yeah. So I just want to say there was a generation, young people who took on the apartheid system. And I think we're missing that. And I don't want to critique anybody. We are partly responsible because you need the Albert Nolans who would help to generate that spirit. When I was asked to be in the Institute for Contextual Theology, I was detained before I came, and then they helped my wife when I was in detention. Before I was staff, I became staff and were charged for treason. It was like a war zone. I don't know what we need to do today to have that spirit coming back to say we can't be governed by criminals. For me, it's as simple as that. Can't be governed by criminals. And after I'd said that, my son came to me and said, I live with the people there, that generation. We are worried about your security now. Now, if I have to worry about security now, I mean, when we had so much trouble then, we need people who will take a stand. That's all we need. And this nonsense must come to an end of criminals who steal money, who impoverish our people and make us sit in darkness. I think we should stand. That's all I can say. If it doesn't happen, we are all responsible for it not happening.
So before we close off, I would like to please invite back onto the podium Terry Sacco to please give us the vote of thanks. Someone once told me, be the best thing you miss about the people who are gone. Yeah. And that's what I believe we do when we learn more about Father Nolan and what he did and how we continue it, is be the very thing that stands out for you about him, because that's probably what you thirst for or hunger to do yourself and adore him to actually do.
So thanks to everybody for coming to celebrate Albert's life and our honoring of him. It's wonderful to feel his love in this space. Tumi, thank you very much for your life-giving facilitation of this book launch. You brought life, you brought fun, you brought humor, and a depth of understanding of the spiritual journey. So thank you very much. Thanks to all of you who've come from very far. I know that a lot of you have come from other parts of South Africa. Hilary, Regan came from Australia, but I believe there's someone else here from Australia. Can stand up and we will thank you for coming. Would like to call on Sis Maria to have a final blessing and then blow out the candle.
Greetings, everyone. I'd like to say I'm honored to be here anyway. Thank you very much. I'm working for the Dominicans in Mondio, and I've worked with Fr Albert for about 10 years. Fr Albert, knowing him, was a very down-to-earth person. Even if you have done something wrong, he'll call you to order and say, you stop, don't do this. But very politely. Yeah, I'd like to say, may his soul continue to rest in peace. You can stand up for a prayer. I'm going to say it in my language. Thank you very much. Amen. Mona o ile wa re fa go hlale ntate ba gore re kgone re fihle ka mona ntate re tlo commemorate letsatsi le bophelo ba ntate Albert Nolan go tlo launchwa buka ya hae re ya kopa hle senatla sa mahodimo gore ntate Albert le yana mo aleng teng re kopa re a robale ka khotso re kopa re lena re le ntse re tadimile a re hlokomela ka nako tsohle a ka kene ha ra ma Dominican ohle le bona aba bless aba protect ka nako tsohle ntate ke a kopa Jehova senatla sa mahodimo ha ke tlo a le ntate ke a kopa Jehova le ba tswang hole le ba leng haufinyana ntate ke re ha re tswa mona re tsamaya ntate dipalang tse re tle re dipalame ntate kope wena ntate ta re sireletsa re ba ba le senatla sa mahodimo ke a o leboha Jehova ke a o leboha ntate ha ke tlo a ke tle be ke senya puo ntate ke re ke a leboha Jehova ka ona motsotswana o leng wa re fa ona wa hore re fihle ka mona ntate ke leboha le crowd ntate e ke bonang ke a leboha haholo ntate Mike le ntate Mike Deeb le Brother Philipe Denis mosebetsi wa itseng ke mosebetsi o motle ke a leboha Jehova modimo a ba hlonolofatse a ba bless ho fetella mona ntate ba tswelle pele ntate ka ho etsa dibuka ka ofela tse rong tse mong ba tlo di etsa ntate mosebetsi ya bona e metla ntate ba fe matla ntate o ba thuse o ba siluleng ntate hohle mo leng ntho tse ba di etsang ntate ba di etse ka matla ha o seng ka rata ha rona se ka bohlale ba rona ntate ba ne le ka bohlale ba hao hore tsohle tsena di etsa hale di pheta hale di tsela ka jeko le betseng di etsa hale le feteng ntate ka ho ke re ke a leboha Jehova sireletsa bana ba hao protecta bana ba hao e tle re ha re tswa mona re tsamaya hantle ntate re lokile re fihlele ba re fihla mo dulang teng I praise you and I love you and I pray you in Jesus name amen.
Now in faith, free of doubt. Tell all men the joyful gospel. Hallelujah, Pelotalona, Itabile Kaofela. Hallelujah, Pelotalona, Itabile Kaofela.